Hello there, it's Friday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever. The only movie podcast to offer objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, Konrad. And with me as always, he's been walking without rhythm for some time, it's Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night. Hello, Konrad, how are you?
I am bloody brilliant this week. It's a new era for us here on the Best Movie Podcast ever. I'm just gonna be honest when someone asks how I am, and it's a good week because I got to see DUNE this week, which I've been looking forward to for I don't even know how long, literally years at this point. And we finally saw it, and we're here to talk about it. How about you?
Yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty good as well. I'm for a different reason than you though, but it is still DUNE related. I'm feeling really good because I have somehow avoided everything to do with DUNE in my life up to this point, and I've just like you, I'm picking the sand out of my mouth because it was a it was a fantastic show.
Do you know what that was? For the audio listeners, I just took a sip of coffee, and this is going to be a damning indictment on my ability to keep a clean home. I took a sip of my coffee, and there was fucking lime scale in the mug, and I was like, "How am I going to play this?" And like my life flashed before my eyes when it happened, because I was like, "We're in mid flow here. I can't restart the podcast," so I had to try and tactically pick out bits of lime scale from my mouth after I threw to Anthony, and Anthony, being the malicious co-host of this podcast that he is, has called me out on it for all to see.
Well, I'll say, just to embarrass myself, I told you this story recently, is that we had limescale in our kettle for must have been 2 years, and we just didn't get a new one, didn't clean it. Like, we were just like, obviously we would rinse it out, but like it was always there. And then one day, Eva's dad bought us a new kettle, and we were like, "Oh, thanks so much. Oh my god, geez, you didn't have to do that." He's like, "It was £3 in Tesco."
Yeah.
We didn't know.
No effort whatsoever went into it. Yeah, I'm normally okay at maintaining the kettle, but we're moving house, and I've clearly been remiss in my duties. So that's my punishment. Is I've had to extract limescale from my mouth live on air, or not live.
Well, live enough. I'm going to say to you, Konrad, because I didn't actually get to finish it because of the old picking of the limescale out your mouth.
Go on.
Why I'm in a very happy mood is because I feel like I've been introduced to a brand new world that I had no idea about, and I'm really, really happy. Like, first thing I did was go straight to IMDb, look up the other DUNE film from the 80s, and think, okay, I want to watch that. But I'm like, should I watch that, or should I wait until the Yeah, I know it's going to be worse, but should I wait till the second Villeneuve one comes out so that I see the story through that? Like, I'm like, what should I do? Because I really, really sort of fell in love with the world, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, because that's going to lead us quite naturally into something I wanted to talk with you about before we got right into it. Mm-hmm. So, without further ado, let's talk about some gosh darn movies.
Let's do it.
Movies. Halloween is over. The scary period has ended, and we've emerged butterfly-like from the other side of the Halloween period, a reborn. Before we get into DUNE, I think it's important for us to establish that we are now entering the hashtag prestige season for movies here. Mm-hmm. Everyone's putting out their movies for the Oscars. We've got Last Night in Soho, we've got DUNE, which we're going to talk about in a minute. We've got the Last Duel, Ridley Scott movie, which I'm very excited to see. French Dispatch, the new Wes Anderson movie, and Jackass Forever, of course.
Oh, yes.
It is all happening. My question to you, Anthony, before we get into DUNE, is which one of these movies should we manufacture an unpopular opinion of to boost our engagement?
That's a good question, actually.
It can't be Jackass. I can't be anti-Jackass. I'm just going to say that now.
Yeah, no, we're not going to get anywhere being anti-Jackass, I think. No, I'm sorry, Konrad. I'm a very honest person, not like you. You know, I'll leave that to you.
I'm happy to be anti The Last Duel because I think Ridley Scott is mental now. Like he used to make good movies once upon a time. Okay, that's fine. Well, The Last Duel, there you go. Look forward to that in the coming weeks. I will be manufacturing an opinion on that, and it's going to start now. So, okay, DUNE stuff. Let's just get into it. DUNE prep. Here's the prep work. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is a movie Well, I was going to say this is a movie that requires a certain amount of prep going in. Like when me and my partner went to see it, I gave her a little talk for about 5 minutes before it started. I was like, "Look, this is what's going to go down in this movie, all right?" So you hadn't seen the David Lynch movie, and you hadn't read the Frank Herbert book.
Haven't read a book.
Books.
Haven't seen the film. Haven't seen the miniseries from 2000, which I now know exists as well. I haven't. To be quite honest with you, I also haven't seen many Timothée Chalamet films. So it was like I've seen a couple of them, but not none of the ones which he's big name for. You know, I think Little Women's probably. Is he Little Women? Yeah, he's probably.
Yeah, he's Little Women.
That's probably the biggest one I've seen him in.
That, and I suppose like Call Me by Your Name was
which I didn't see. Kind of... Yeah, I didn't see that yet. But
oh, you should see that. You would like that movie, I think.
Yeah. Lady Bird I saw as well. But anyway, I was sort of new to him as a leading man as well, so it was a whole load of new stuff for me. But yeah, like, so I'm gonna say something from the get go. It seems to me like I'm assuming this book was written a long time ago.
Yeah, I think it was late 50s or 60s that it came out.
Yeah, and I was worried going into this, which we'll get to the details as we go. But I was worried going into this that it was gonna suffer from, like, because I haven't seen it. I'm assuming. Before I saw it, I was assuming that a lot of sci-fi that I have seen has drawn heavily from it, and therefore I felt that this would feel derivative, even though it's original. But it didn't at all for me. It actually felt like it didn't feel like that at all. Even though I saw things that potentially led to other things in the genre, it felt fresh. It felt like it was doing it and treading that ground for the first time for me. I really liked it.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Yeah, so I mean, from my point of view, I'm probably more of a fan. Like, going into it, I probably knew more about it than you did. But even I've seen the Lynch film. I've read like the first 100 pages of the first book, and it is, and this is slightly pun intended, it is a dry fucking book. Like, it's all kind of space feudalism, and it's interesting, but it's very, very dense. And yeah, not an easy book to read, and I can only assume that the others are equally dense. Although I would like to go back and read them. I think they're very much on the list. But so we'll, because this is a new movie, we'll try and do non-spoiler stuff first, and then we'll kind of make a point of saying, now we're going to talk about some spoilers in this movie later. Yeah. So don't worry about having it spoiled for you too early on. But so just to give a brief outline of the plot of this movie, it's not the whole of the first book. It's I think probably about half of the first book, maybe even less than that actually. And it essentially tells the story of a like noble house in the future called House Atreides, who are run by Duke Leto, played by Oscar Isaac. His not wife. What's the word? Concubine. That's what she is. Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who I've had a real renaissance with Rebecca Ferguson in the last couple of years, because I don't really remember seeing her in much prior to seeing her in Doctor Sleep last year.
Yeah, I didn't see Doctor Sleep actually, but I will say to you, there is never enough Rebecca Ferguson for me.
What was that from? I don't know what that was.
The Greatest Showman. That's her song she sings.
Oh, of course. Yeah, she's the Greatest Showman.
Yeah, she doesn't actually sing it, but no. she mimes it while a singer sings it. Yeah.
And she does a convincing job of it because, well, or does she? Because I didn't even remember she was in that movie. But
she's ginger in it, so it's a little different.
But yeah, so she's the concubine of Duke Leto. You've got Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, who's our leading man. And essentially, this noble house Atreides, they're very prim and proper, and they're very much like the good guys, and they are called upon by the Emperor to take over the fiefdom of Arrakis, which is like a desert planet that's run by their bitter rivals, House Harkonnen, and it's on Arrakis that all of the spice is produced. It's this desert world, and spice is essentially used to kind of power the Empire by making interstellar travel possible. You've got these guys who I don't even think are mentioned in this. They're definitely mentioned in the Lynch movie, but they're like called guild navigators, and essentially they get all hepped up on spice, and then they're able to kind of plot courses across the stars. And also there's big worms on Arrakis. Everyone knows that. It's in the marketing material. They're very cool. But I mean, there's like intrigue here, obviously. Like, the plot goes in directions that perhaps you wouldn't expect it to. But I think I was interested to get your opinion on this. This movie, to me, is more about kind of setting a very rich and very a very fascinating to look at and explore table in a way that really, really worked for me. But I could see maybe some people finding it a little slow because of that.
I know exactly what you mean. Okay, so it did feel like they were setting the table. It was very slow, I would use the word considered, you know.
Yeah, sure.
It was a slow burn and it was sort of very slowly putting things in place. Now I'm afraid, like, if they had put this all into one film, now, Conrad, you know me, I'm pretty good at like keeping up with like sort of the world building of stuff in the beginning of films and stuff. So I probably could have kept up, but I can imagine it would be very difficult for some people if you just put it all in the one film rather than splitting it in two like they have. If you had like a 2.5 hour film where this whole setup would have been in like the first half an hour to an hour, and it would have been a lot like there's Atreides, there's Harkonnen, and it would have been really too much. Whereas we were really given time to think and to dwell and to meet the new characters and meet this sect of people and meet these. And I, to be honest with you, was not lost or confused at one moment at all in the setup of this. I thought it was great. I think they did a good job. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's really good to hear, because I think that is the David Lynch movie isn't a bad movie, but it definitely falls victim to that. Like, well, it has tonal problems, I think, but also it's about 2.5 hours long, maybe just shy of 3, and they try to get so much into that, and in doing so, you just lose 90% of what makes Dune so cool, and that really is just it's just the world building. You know, there's just this gorgeous kind of rich setup to this. And I think Villeneuve wants you to just submerge yourself in the world of Dune, and kind of trust in the storytelling process, that even though you might know who the Bene Gesserit are at the beginning, or the Sardaukar, or you know, all these characters, that you get these weird names thrown off.
Yeah.
Which I will say right now, I know this has become a bit of a meme since Dune has become popular. I've been saying that Duncan Idaho is a ridiculous name for a character for a long time, and I'm glad to finally have people on board with me. You know, you've got everyone else has got like kind of, they're not normal because they're like fantasy names. You've got Paul Atreides and Duke Leto and Gurney Halleck. These all sound like believable kind of fantasy names, and they just got Duncan Idaho, which is just like, what?
I know what you mean, but I do think like it is hilarious. Don't get me wrong, and it's funny as well, like, because obviously there must be like, you know, this must be like in the future, and they originally came from Earth and stuff, which is, I assume that from the style of sci-fi it is, whereas like something like
I actually don't know, it could be, maybe they are humans. I
assume they're humans, maybe not, but the style of sci-fi makes me think that, whereas like Star Wars, obviously, you know, you've got like Obi-Wan. This actually, it's funny, I sort of had the opposite opinion to you, Conrad. Obviously Duncan Idaho is a stupid hilarious name, but I thought to myself, like, it's not like we've got, like, instead of like having Anakin and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, we've got Paul and Jessica. But you had like Luke though, right? Yeah,
you know,
that's
like
true.
That like, I feel like George Lucas definitely took stuff.
He lost himself. He lost himself in that, didn't he? Because he had Luke at the beginning, and then he lost himself.
And there was like Leia and Han, and then like what? Yeah, he had Luke and Ben Kenobi, and then halfway through the first movie, he's like, let's call him Obi-Wan instead. Actually, I don't like Ben. And then before you know it, he's off. He's away with the fairies, and he's got fucking Admiral Akbar and everything else going on.
Exactly.
And it's funny. I like Admiral Akbar, to be fair. He's a good character.
He's good.
I will say actually that you've raised an interesting comparison there, which is something I wanted to hit in the discussion of this, which is that, for me, watching this movie, there is always that sense that there are things happening off screen which are just as interesting as what we are seeing. You know, you get the sense that there's like kind of a broader galactic political game going on here, and that there's other kind of machinations that would be fascinating to see. And it really put me in, or really captures the feeling I had for Star Wars when I was a kid. I think you might be, you're slightly younger than me, so you were maybe a bit more like this with the prequels. But when I was a kid and I watched the original trilogy, I really wanted to like know who Mandalorians were, or know why some of those stormtroopers in A New Hope had orange shoulder pads. You know, like it really sort of captures your imagination in that way, and I feel like this does a great job of it too. The Sardaukar that you see very briefly, and you see who are like the sort of soldiers of the Empire. They're like these elite soldiers. and you see like training facility for them, and there's like this weird like throat singing going on in the background, and they're being like daubed in sacrificial blood, and it's just like, this is so cool. And it's literally maybe not even a minute long scene, and then and it's just to establish that they're bad motherfuckers, and then that's all we get of them, and it's so good.
Yeah, it does actually make me wonder how much is in the book and how much is different, because I would imagine that the world being built in this is a little different to the one in the 80s film, I would imagine. And so stuff like, for example, there's a particular scene where we see a character having like a healing bath, which is kind of like laying in oil.
Yeah, that's so gross.
And I thought, I like stuff like that. I suppose I need to read the book because I'm thinking to myself like this. I want to know where Denis Villeneuve took license to sort of create his own vision, and what is directly described in the book. Because I would imagine like some stuff. Like, I doubt that they describe Dave Bautista in the book, you know. So, like, I want to know what is new and what's not. That's kind of why I wanted to go and watch the 1984 film, because although I don't want to know the story yet, I don't want the story through that avenue. I wanted to know what aspects of this film were new, if you know what I mean. Because I loved it so much, and I thought, like, what was his take on it? Because I know his take on it now, but how much of that is his take, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely stuff to be gleaned from that. That was my main point of reference, and I think you raise an interesting point with Baron Harkonnen, Stellan Skarsgård's character, because in the Lynch movie, he's just kind of like a guy, like he's kind of fat, and he has like boils on his face and like disgusting like ginger hair, but he's like, but he's not like inhuman. He doesn't seem.
He looks like something out of 300 in this.
Yeah, exactly. Like so in the Lynch movie, he looks like he might have been an extra in the Rocky Horror Picture Show or something. Like, he's not a particularly intimidating character. In this, and I have to say, the makeup effects on Stellan Skarsgård are amazing in this. Like, and the way he moves and the way he's presented is really, really striking. And I feel like I can't speak to how much of the this sort of production design as a whole is in the books, but I can say with fair amount of confidence that the still suits, the suits that they wear that distill water from their bodily excretions to allow them to traverse the desert, I think that's pretty consistent with what we saw in the Dune movie and in the 84 Lynch. I think it was 84, the Lynch movie, and therefore probably in the book as well. And obviously, I think there's something else I wanted to talk to you about actually, the aesthetic of kind of Middle Eastern inspired garb and like both tool and the kind of building design. I think they do a good job of channeling that while also kind of walking the tightrope of not letting this is going to sound like I'm condemning it for having words like jihad and stuff in the book, but and obviously like they are very thematically important, but I feel like if they'd included that kind of stuff in the screenplay, it would have been almost like an inadvertent dog whistle for shitty people to be like, oh, this movie's supporting Islamic fundamentalism, when it's really not. But I mean, did you get a sense of that stuff in this, like kind of pulling from that the Middle Eastern unrest in the 50s and 60s?
Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I got exactly like the complete analogy to the unrest in terms of the political unrest. I think there's a Sacha Baron Cohen's film called The Spy, which is about Israel and Syria and the things going on there, which is an interesting watch. Again, I'm completely ignorant to it, so maybe someone from that area would watch that and think it's completely historically inaccurate, but I don't know. But the actual style of the costumes and things, especially some of the things that Jessica was wearing, very much seemed to draw from that. And again, like when the book was written, and published in like 65, you can very much imagine that a lot of the people reading this book it was completely alien to them, the ideas of the Middle Eastern world. So that's why, and also things that happen as history goes on. Obviously, there's words these days which have been completely taken over by certain people who want to put certain things in your head. But yeah, I didn't know. Obviously, I didn't know that was jihad and stuff was in the book. But I definitely felt Middle Eastern inspiration, and it makes sense as well because obviously the landscape they're in. If you're going to try and design a culture around a landscape of sand and dunes, it probably makes sense to look at the ones we have on Earth and think, how did they do it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's very. A lot of the stylings are very heavily based on that kind of like Bedouin desert culture, and the books do, and the Lynch movie kind of progress towards this idea of holy war, which isn't really explored too much in this one because, as I say, it's more set up. But so I think we're now going to have to take the dangerous step of shifting into full on spoiler territory here. So if you haven't seen Dune, or and you care to not know what happens in the Villeneuve movie, this is your cue to check out, and maybe check back in with us at the end when we'll talk about give a brief overview of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so first things first. And this is something that I would like for you to see in the Lynch movie, because the Lynch movie is like half Flash Gordon and half like super dry sci-fi. Like some parts of it seems really cheesy, and some parts seem very, very self-serious. And there's a moment where the character of Dr. I don't even know if he's named in either movie, to be honest, but Dr. Yo, who is the guy who
he's named in this one. He's named in this one, yeah.
He is, okay, cool. I didn't actually catch him being called anything, but Dr. Yo, and he betrays House Atreides because his wife is being held prisoner by House Harkonnen, and is basically said, you got to power down the shields and do a bunch of other shit to let us sneak up on them. And his betrayal in this is, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, about 1,000,000 times better than it is in the David Lynch movie.
Okay.
In the David Lynch movie, there is a fantastic bit where, so for those of you who haven't seen it, he replaces one of Duke Leto's teeth and tells him to like crunch down on it when he's in Baron Harkonnen's presence, so he kills both of them. And in the David Lynch movie, while Duke Leto is kind of like hallucinating from the paralysis dart that he's been hit with, he's just envisaging the face of Dr. Yo like he's waking up from a dream, just going, the tooth, and it's just the most it just ruins the tone of the scene entirely. God. And if you like watch this movie and try to imagine that kind of like like kind of dream sequence, it would not have worked.
Yeah, like that's funny to hear, because I think they did that betrayal really, really well, especially considering that like he basically betrayed the good guys, and they very quickly were able to make me feel empathy to the character. Like even before we found out that his wife had been killed. As soon as he gave him the tooth and said, "Here, it's your only chance to survive. I have to do this. Sorry," I immediately was like, "Oh, okay." And not that I wanted him to do it, but I was like, "Okay, I understand." And then whenever Baron Harkonnen says to him, you know, "Here you go, join your wife then," and then kills
Why
her.
don't you join her?
Yeah.
Like in his Stellan Skarsgård voice, and then cuts his throat.
Yeah, like that was a powerful moment for me, to be honest with you. And then I was just like willing the tooth to be crushed, you know.
Yeah, I love that moment. He does it actually prior to that moment in the film, but it's captured really well in that moment. The thing that Baron Harkonnen does, where he kind of levitates, and it looks like he's just
tall.
growing because he's wearing like a really long robe, and it's so off-putting and unsettling. Okay, so talking about cool characters, then we've mentioned him once. We've got to pay lip service to him now. Duncan Idaho in the Lynch movie, and I do apologize for anyone who's listening that I'm gonna keep comparing this back to the Lynch movie, but it's obviously gonna happen because it's the same source material. In the Lynch film, Duncan Idaho is essentially just a guy. He probably gets about 2 lines, and then he dies during the big betrayal sequence. How did you find, not that you have any context for comparison, but how did you find Jason Momoa in this one?
I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. The first time Timothée Chalamet went up to him and was like throwing the arms around, like, "Hey, bud, how are you?" You know, it really felt like, you know, like, maybe this is what it's meant to feel like, but it felt like, you know, like the little brother putting his arm around the sister's boyfriend. You know, it's like, oh, he's my best friend in the world. You know, that's sort of what I got from it. But no, I think he did a good job. I think he was very believable in his sort of love of the Fremen people, and I liked sort of how he was used to sort of give us information about them before we met them. I think that was a cool vehicle to get that information given to us, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think successful character.
Yeah, absolutely. And like while we're on that subject, did you recognize Javier Bardem as Stilgar?
I did. Yes, I did.
I had to go and check the. I was like, who is that? And then I looked at it. I was like, holy shit, that's Javier Bardem. That does not look like him.
I think I recognize him from the I put it together because of his voice. You know what I mean as well.
Yeah.
I would say that really interesting that Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem are in this, and they're both small roles. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that like that Oscar-winning film that they were in like 12 years ago or whatever, eventually they would just be small roles in a big sci-fi, like, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say anything too much about what might happen in the next Dune movie, but you may see some more of those characters together reenacting No Country for Old Men in minor ways. We'll see.
Is there? Oh my god, the what do they call it? Like the sand whip thing. It's basically like the pressure gun that he has in No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, that's true. There you go. Perfect. All we need is Tommy Lee Jones to turn up, and we've completed the set of the car. And will Woody Harrelson as well. Actually, that'd be good if he could turn up with a massive cowboy hat. So yeah, Jason Momoa. I'm a big self-admitted fan of Jason Momoa. I think he's a limited actor, but I think he's an actor who knows his limits. And when he's cast in the right roles, like Aquaman, he's very charismatic. He can be badass. It's very much his speed, and this is kind of the role that he's playing here. Yeah. I've got to ask you a question though, Anthony. As a bearded man, clean-shaven Jason Momoa, where do we fall down on that? Like, where are we landing on that?
It worked for the character, but I will say it's a bit weird to see because the type of muscly, like the type of like big beefy man he is, like he's like a strong man, you know what I mean? So he's carrying a bit. So he had a bit more around the chin than I would have expected him to have.
Yeah, there's a slight jowl, and you know, again, like those in glass houses, I'm not calling out Jason Momoa.
That's why I don't shave, Conrad. That's why I do not shave.
But I think it may be the first time that I've ever seen Jason Momoa's chin, because he's bearded in pretty much everything I've ever seen.
Yeah, in his chin, definitely his chin. I've seen his jaw because I think in Game of Thrones he didn't have a full beard. I think he had
he had the Leonidas goatee that kind of points down. But yeah, I mean, it's not enough to detract from the character who gets to do far more cool stuff. Really gets to prove how much of a badass he is.
Oh yeah.
And that leads us rather quite naturally into the whole like slow shield thing.
Yes.
Did that like? I love the concept. I was fascinated to see how they depicted the fight sequences. So essentially, they have to. This is the part that I don't really know that much about because I've only read a little bit of the books. But essentially, at some point, they develop this shield that stops fast-moving projectiles.
Yeah.
Like bullets, which is why they stopped using guns. I think at some point someone shot one of the slow shields with like a laser gun, and it caused essentially like a thermonuclear reaction. So they're like, no more of that. We're fighting with swords from now on. And there was born this sort of style of martial arts where it's quick movements, but then slow movements to penetrate the shield. And the idea of choreographing for that sounds like an absolute nightmare. But for me, I thought the combat feels really cool. Yeah. How did you feel about it?
I did like it, but I will say that I in a film that felt so like Denis Villeneuve, I like his style. I haven't seen Blade Runner 2049 yet, but I will say, for me, the only part of the film that I maybe would criticize a little bit, to be honest with you, there was very little that I could criticize with this film. It did feel like I need to wait for the second to really take it all in, and I really enjoyed this one. But I didn't like and I know it's probably straight from the book, but I didn't like the formulaic way that they had like the master Josh Brolin and the apprentice Timothée Chalamet scene where they were like fighting each other, and it was all used to develop their relationship, but also used to develop the idea of the slow suits or the slow shields. I personally would have preferred them come up with something a little bit more original in terms of introducing those two plot points. Although it didn't take away fully from me, but if I was gonna pick something, that little formulaic, here's where we have the master apprentice scene, didn't really work in terms of being a new, original, brilliant take on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and I think I think Josh Brolin does a really good job as Gurney Halleck, but I agree he's quite a stereotypical character. Interesting that you mentioned that though. How did you feel about it, if that kind of way to explain the idea of a slow shield didn't really do it for you. How did you feel about the little video projector that Timothée Chalamet has that introduces the idea of walking without rhythm in a very, very short video clip that he's kind of listening to as he's doing other stuff?
Yeah, because maybe because that's such a short little just sort of here's a bit of information for you. I didn't actually have that much of a problem with that. It's just because of I've just seen that Master Apprentice scene so many times in so many films.
Yeah.
I will say though that the flow shields in general, when it first was introduced in that scene, I was like, oh, okay, this is a bit interesting. I wasn't sure how I felt about them, to be honest with you. I like the idea of these CG things that come out around your body and then are disappeared until they are activated. I was like, okay, this might be a bit naff, but I didn't think that though. Once they started actually using them in real fights, I actually thought it was really cool. And then by the end of the film, I was thinking to myself, oh, I can't wait to go home and tell Emer about this detail because I think I've never seen it before. I've never seen the idea of having to go slow to kill someone. So I came around on it big time, to be honest.
Okay, that's cool. Like I just thought the choreography was so good, and so it perfectly encapsulated how I see that kind of that style of martial art in my head. So okay, like two last things to finish. Then there are really only, I think it's probably fair. No, there's more than two set pieces, but there's two big set pieces that I wanted to discuss because I think these are the moments that the movie kind of hangs its hat on as being like, if you can stay engaged with the very rich, very dense lore in between these set pieces, you will enjoy this movie because the set pieces I think are brilliant. And that is, first off, the Ornithopter rescue of the crew of one of the spice harvesters that introduces us to there's a lot going on in that scene. So we're introduced first off to the Ornithopter Design, which is super cool. I don't know how you felt about those like grasshopper looking things, but
thought it was really cool. It was part of what I thought is like design over practicality here.
Are you suggesting that the physics of that design don't make sense?
I mean, if someone wants to explain to me why you would go for them over traditional helicopter blades, I will take your explanation because I want to believe.
Listen, we live in an age where scientific evidence is no longer important for anything, apparently. So I reject all physical discussion or physics discussions. Ornithopters look fucking cool. That's my. I'll
also say, if the wings are moving that fast, there's no chance you're hearing anything anyone's saying. Hang on, Conrad. We didn't even talk about the voice thing.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, the voice, it's one of those kind of things that
I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting that in this film at all.
Yeah, it's not really... So from my memory, which admittedly isn't great, I think the voice becomes far more important later on. But yes, you've got like... I mean, let's call it what it is. It's essentially the Force. Like, you can command people to do stuff with your voice. I mean, the Bene Gesserit... so to give a brief bit of backstory, the Bene Gesserit are essentially this kind of... I guess wizards, really, if you want to get right down to it. They're sort of a sect of women who are in close alliance with the Emperor, and they are quite sort of protective of their own. And Timothy or Paul Atreides' mother is one of them, and has trained him in the way of the voice, which is essentially commanding people to do what you want. And yeah, I mean, he has the ability to use it. How do you see that coming back in later films, if at all?
I think it'll come back. I think that it's going to lead to. I would imagine it's going to lead to a moment where he uses that power against maybe the Emperor. Like, we haven't met the Emperor yet, I don't think.
No. But we haven't met like the Emperor. We haven't seen guild navigators. There's a lot of stuff we haven't seen so far.
And he did mention that he like sort of laid the seed that he might want to run for Emperor one day.
Yeah. Paul Atreides 2941 or whatever.
Yeah. So I thought it was really cool. I thought the voice, again, the first time I heard the voice, I was thinking, okay, I can hear the mixes you put into that audio. But at the same time, it grew on me as well. Like, I think the first time that the shields were there and the first time the voice was used, it took a little bit of readjustment because I was a little bit like, oh, okay. It was like a reminder that I was watching a film. You know what I mean? And then I got there in the end. So actually, no, I think that's pretty good. I'm happy there. I was going to make a point about it, but I can't remember what it is, Conrad. So you continue on, and I'll see if I can remember.
Well, I enjoy the voice stuff. I kind of know, because even though I've only read seen the original movie and read a bit of the books, I kind of know where the Dune story goes. So without giving too much away, the Bene Gesserit kind of voice stuff and like Paul's hidden destiny become a much bigger part of the story further down
I've
the
got
line.
a prediction. This is a weird thing to do because it won't come true for years. Because I am going to wait for the next film because I don't want to ruin it. But I think the fact that Jessica is pregnant is going to become a huge thing, and I think people are going to start maybe believing that baby is the chosen one. I think that's sort of how it's going to go. But okay. I remember what I was going to say. I thought it was a really interesting point, and I love the little detail that they usually don't allow men to train with this force power with the voice because like they're too arrogant, cocky, or whatever, or they're too easily put into a position of privilege where they could overuse it. Now that reminds me of a very off-color joke by Bill Burr. by Bill Burr.
Okay,
and it sounds like really, really like bad until you actually think about what he's actually saying. But he basically says that the world is lucky that an ego such as Kanye West was born in a black man's body, because he says if he was a white man and he didn't have the barriers that society puts on a black man, he would have been Hitler. That's what Bill Burr says.
All right. Thanks, Bill Burr, for getting our podcast cancelled by that joke. No, I think I'm not going to give anything away. All I'm going to say is there is a very, from my memory, so if anyone knows Dune better than I do, which I'm sure loads of people do, please correct me if I'm wrong, but from my memory, there's a very good reason why the Bene Gesserit order don't let men learn the voice, and why Rebecca Ferguson's character Jessica was supposed to choose to have a girl. So there's a throwaway line in this movie where I can't remember the character's name, but Paul is talking to like the head of the Bene Gesserit order, and I think she says to Paul that your mother was supposed to have a girl. I heard that, because the Bene Gesserit can essentially choose the gender of the child, and she chose to have a boy, and that's gonna become a thing later on down the line in this.
Interesting. I find it interesting as well that like the chosen one. What I gathered from that is the chosen one thing. Also, they call it the one, which I thought was funny because like the Matrix took that. But they call it the one. This one, is it just Fremen people who have this prophecy, or is it like a universe-wide thing?
I'm gonna have to pass on that because there are prophecies that the Emperor is aware of and doesn't want to happen, and there are Fremen prophecies as well, and there is going to be some crossover between them. Is all I'll say. All right, cool. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to where it goes. And so, okay, the last thing I just wanted to say: the big betrayal sequence, lots of explosions, great kind of line fighting sequences between the Atreides infantry and the Sardaukar and the Harkonnen guys. Did that like do it for you as far as kind of action? It's not even really a climax because there's still about half an hour of movie, or probably more than half an hour, probably about 45 minutes of movie left to happen at that point. But did that kind of get you pumped up for seeing where the movie went?
It did, yes, but also you're right in saying earlier on when you said like things happening off camera, because we did get it, but we didn't get too much of it, to be honest with you. Like they very much like we went with Paul and Jessica in the little helicopter thing. So we got it. I enjoyed it. I liked the big battle and the things exploding in the sky and the big ships exploding within the port. And like,
Duncan Idaho's X-wing Death Star trench run moment where he's just
he did a good job. Around. He did a good job, and then
he did.
Well, I mean, like that was pretty good. I think I enjoyed it, but the end of this film, I wanted to say at the very beginning, then I remember we weren't doing spoilers, but I just want to say there was a huge amount of excitement, obviously, in a few different action scenes. Having said that, the way this film ends is really interesting to me, because I thought to myself, walking out of the cinema, when the way it ends, like, you know, sort of Paul kills the guy. I loved that fight. I loved the way the emotion was done. I loved how his mother said Paul's never killed a man, and there was the weight behind it. I just felt that I was in that moment. I really loved it. And then when they decide to go with them, then you find out that they're riding the worms. However that fucking happens, that sounds...
Yeah, that's something to look forward to.
I mean, I actually thought to myself whenever Liet Kynes, I think, Dr. Liet Kynes, who was like the trades person or whatever, like the trade counselor or whatever you call her, she had the hooks out, and I was like, is she gonna ride this thing? And then
she was gonna try.
Yeah, so I that's really cool. But I'll say, I was walking out of the cinema, the way it ended, I was walking out because I knew the time. I was like, this must be ending soon. This is crazy the way this is ending. And when it ended, I was walking out of the cinema thinking, I don't think casuals are going to like that ending. And then I thought to myself, what the fuck am I talking about? I'm a casual. That was awesome. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm really interested to see. I was looking at how it was doing financially today, actually, and it's making good money, which I know isn't a benchmark for quality, but I'm one of those people who... I loved Blade Runner 2049, and when it came out and it like made less money than whatever Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movie came out the same weekend, I was like, well, okay, we've lost. Cinema's lost. Sorry, everyone. And this seems to be doing well. But I think there is still that fear where it's like, is there enough like action in this? And is that ending going to satisfy people? Because the ending is literally... they get kind of adopted into the Freeman and they wander off into the desert, and the setup is there for the sequel, but it's not like a big kind of like, oh, there's a ticking clock and we need to do stuff with the Avengers or whatever. Not to dismiss those movies, they're good movies in their own right, but it doesn't have that same kind of impetus that a lot of casual moviegoers might want from something that's so directly setting up a sequel.
It's just intrigue, isn't it? It's intrigue, and it's thinking... It's all on the weight of these characters, and it really works. I can't believe that I love that ending as well as it did. And actually, the fact that it's doing well financially means that they've already greenlit the second one. Because apparently, I did read that crazily when Denis Villeneuve decided to make this part one. Crazily, apparently, they had not greenlit the second one, and they were waiting to see how it did. And can you imagine if it did poorly and they never made another one?
That would break my heart. But I mean, he's not. His movies are always very good. They range from good to excellent, and they always sort of make money. But I think a lot of the time he isn't really like a box office smash. Mm-hmm. So this was his big chance at bat, I think, to be like, I can make a movie that's going to make lots of money, and hopefully this is it. So okay, let's talk ratings then.
Okay,
where do you fall down on Dune? Like, what's your rating for it?
This is a hard one. It's a hard one because if we were going, I say this all the time, Konrad. I know, I'm sorry, I'm fucking up the system here, but if we were going out of 10, I would give it a 9. I would. Now it's whether I want to round up or down. And I think.
It's that tension, though. That's the choice that you have to make. That's why it's such a good system, a 5-star system.
I honestly think that this might be recency bias, because when I love a film in the cinema, I love it for like a week and I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah. But I am going to give it 5-star. I think. Okay. I think I really enjoyed it, and as well as that, it introduced me to a new world, and that is a lot. That's a whole star rating in itself, I think.
Yeah. No, I think I could see the argument for either one. Personally, I didn't like it quite as much as Blade Runner 2049, so for that reason, I gave it 4. But it's a brilliant movie. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait to see the next one. It's in pre-production, so I guess we'll see it in like 2024, probably 2023 if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. But I think that is gonna do it there for us. For this week's episode of the Best Movie Podcast Ever, which leaves us with one simple question to answer, as we always do, and that is, Anthony, what's your favourite movie this week?
Favourite movie this week? Let's go for Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna pick a serious answer and go for Dune.
I knew you were gonna do that. That's why I didn't do it.
How dare you? How dare you sully the good name of this podcast?
All I'll say is that this film, although about sand, is not as good as the original one about sand, Attack of the Clones, because it's like sand. It's like sand.
Send your emails to Anthony's personal email address, please, for that. I'll link it in the description below. Get him attacked. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song, and check out links to their stuff down in the description below. And thank you to you for joining us. Please consider subscribing. We're the best movie podcast ever on podcasting apps, and we are the Culture Cave on YouTube. Give the show a like and get involved in the comments. It really does help us. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
And cut.